Welcome back to Mages and Sages interview with the Old Mage with our special guest Jeff Grubb. This is part 4 in our final installment with our interview with Jeff. I really do hope you enjoy and do get into more realms topics here toward the end. It's a short episode, but I think you'll find it very interesting.
The idea that basically that they were always the exotic locations that were on the borders, and the borders kept moving out. So basically, they would swallow those particular areas and keep on going. So, and that's one reason we ended up with so many different, Arabian Nights type areas. And of course, in Al-Qadim, I then retro justified it by saying, once upon a time, the people of Al-Qadim could not get along, so fate sent them to separate corners of the world. So, where they had a timeout, and that's why you have all of these different Termish, etc. All these areas that have that Mid-Eastern feel, without necessarily being part of a unified whole.
Right. You see, Jeff, there's an early Lovecraft novel that is in his Dunsany period, The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, and in that, Randolph Carter observes a lot of ships coming from afar. And they have these mysterious merchants who are shrouded and so on. And they come from the land of this. And they bring this on their ship.
Yes.
And that's about all you know about them. Well, as an early DM, when I was going beyond my initial Mert stories, Waterdeep's this great port. So's Baldur's Gate. So's Neverwinter. So's Luskan. So ships are coming. Where are they coming from? I don't know. Here's a nice name. And what are they bringing in the holds of the ship? Which means they've got an excess of it. And they want to fill the ship up with something that they can get at that port. So all of these places around the edge. And then later on, when the realms became a D&D world, and I don't mean when TSR started publishing it.
But when you started playing with your team.
Yeah. Then I had to find, okay, where do the Flynn live? Where do the Knolls live? Where are the dwarf kingdoms? Some of them are easy. You go down. Dwarf kingdoms are inside these mountains, and down underneath. So are the Drow, inside these mountains and down underneath. All these other people. Okay, I have to find a place on the surface. Okay, how come they aren't camped on top of you, fighting with you every 5 minutes? Because they're way over there. And so you put them on corners of the map, and you grow the world. And then along comes this company. and they want it to make sense, and that's no problem as long as you work out your trade routes and where they sail and which rivers are navigable, and then it all makes a big holistic working thing. But it's always changing.
But that's part of it as well. Is we don't show the trade routes necessarily. We show some of the major roads. We don't show where this item is produced, and but we know it. Because it becomes foundational and becomes the stuff that helps inform the designers and the writers. Is saying, okay, I got a caravan out of Sembia, and they're going to be attacked by orcs. And okay, what are they carrying? What are they carrying that doesn't, that you can't produce in Cormyr, that would necessitate them to basically a profitable trade for that? There's a book that I'm reading that I often just quote the title because it's one of these great titles that just freaks people out. It's The Mediterranean and the Mediterranean World in the Reign of King Philip II.
Just kind of rolls off the tongue right there,
Volume 1. I have not finished this book. It is the book I take when I go on long distance trips because it's the single book, and it talks about. He started with the idea of, okay, if King Philip of Spain, they had all this wealth coming in, why did they go broke? Hyperinflation, Venetian merchants, etc. But he got into the larger issue of thinking of what the Mediterranean is like as a unit, as opposed to telling the history of one nation. It's not the history of Spain, but it's the entire Mediterranean and how it balances and what the trade routes are. And basically the driving of cattle, for example, from the northern Europe to southern Europe, because that's where, the money was. And thereby, and on the return trip, bringing the silks and bringing the clothing and bringing the finished metals up north. And this becomes like somebody recommended it to me. Literally, say, if you're doing world building, you should take a look at it. And it's so very, very good about it. And I haven't finished it. It's still going to be my ongoing, I'm going to be reading this forever type book. But it's got a lot of good pieces that I'm taking and I'm using in world building, because that's become my job. I mean, this is what I'm doing for Amazon right now. This is what I was doing for Guild Wars. Before that, is I help world build it. And if you create a reasonable logic underneath it, it basically helps create the reality of it. I look at, Star Trek as an example. So the original series is set on a military ship, so you're not really worried about trade or money or that sort of thing, and you're looking at what the writers are doing in order to create conflict. That your engine needs this one component, which means you have to go to this mining colony, which is being threatened by a monster type of thing. They had to build that as they went along, trying to figure out what this merchandising of the future with replicators is going to. Why do you have trade? That sort of thing. And that's not something that would be a story or a book that or a show that anybody would be interested in, but it underpins the entire creation of the world.
Right. I think we have time for one more question.
Okay, one more question.
We'll end it. This should be kind of easy. What do you think happened to Alias after the novels you wrote, where she was introduced and she's featured in? What do you think happened to her storyline? If you could have continued it, what would you have had her life be like in the following decades after that?
It would be interesting, because we have Alias, we have the Alii, which I think if we continued to write it at the time, we probably would be we talked about Kat, we talked about Jade, we talked about some of the creations that are the sisters, daughters of the situation. I would probably, have told more tales about the Alii if I continued, if I had continued. In the modern age, in the current age of the Forgotten Realms, if they came back and said, what we really need? We need a strong female character. We want to do movies about this. What can you do for Alias? Well, she is, much like many people in the realms, she is ever living. So she can be near immortal. She was a created thing, so she could still. I was surprised to find Dragonback Bait was still alive. I mean,
right.
The realms officially has jumped 100 years, right?
Yes.
I'm looking at Ed for this, and yes. But everybody is still alive. Elminster, okay, fine, he's immortal. Dritz, he's still around.
Well, after we had a secret summit at Gen Con.
Yes.
And Bob was really appalled at this century time jump.
Yeah.
And he essentially sat down to figure out ways that all of his characters could survive it. And then he sat down with me and said, you realize, if we lose all these people before their stories are told, they're killing the goose that laid the golden egg. And long after all of them are fired because of it, we're going to have to put the pieces back together again. So let's figure out a way to make our characters survive.
That is not out of the question, and that's absolutely true. I did joke that basically Alias, because when they made the jump that that Alias would be long living, maybe immortal. She might be the great aunt that shows up every so often. And basically into their lives, and she's always been there, and she's always been the great aunt, and nobody's really sure, how she's related, but she's connected with the Wyvernspurs family somehow. Right. So that was a positive. And Olive, I would think that she would have many descendants. That basically, so you would be dealing with future Olives. And as far as Dragon Bait, I did not consider that he would just be alive after all this time. That they would find him in an iceberg, basically with this red, white, and blue shield on him. So because he's a paladin.
Waited long enough.
That's right.
So Namor comes and throws him into the water because he was being worshipped by Inuits. So yes, I got my mental okay, we're shifting 100 years. What happens if Alias came back? She would have a different story at this point. Right. Now, They aren't doing it. There's not a lot of interest in that, which is okay. People like the stories we've written, and I'd rather write the stories that we have an idea for, and yes, we have ideas, and there's an interest for. So if they ever come and say, hey, we're doing books, would you be interested in doing one? Yes, I have ideas. Would they happen? Probably not. And that's okay, because I've never really felt bad like I have a story I've been aching to tell, and basically I'm letting things go on. I know friends who have basically tried to defend their creations for a lot longer than they are capable of, or the ideas that have kept on going when they should have stopped.
Right.
So,
I love that. I love that idea of Alias as the great aunt.
Mm-hmm.
Really, she's going to float into the family. Yeah.
And
them
she's
saying,
"Oh,
young,
yeah, but they say something like, "Oh, yes, Azun the Fourth will not see his like again," and she would say something like, "Yeah, he was a great hunter," and she leaves the room. And everybody goes, "What?
What?"
No. With Azun, it would be, "Oh yes, he snores."
Yeah. Of course it would. I was trying not to go there, but yeah.
You know this without necessarily being involved. It's cool.
Yeah.
Who's running Cormier nowadays? Wouldn't be 10 after her.
No. Aaron Evans.
Yeah.
Wrote a book called Fire in the Blood, which is the great book, one of the Brimstone Angels things, and in that we get to see the passage of power.
Okay.
And we have a ruling queen now. The best way to do it is to grab a copy of Fire in the Blood, flip it open.
Yeah.
Because we did a family tree. And you can see the Urzurid and the bad uncle who has a distant claim on the throne.
Right.
And then you see the two children, and the older one is the male, and he was named king when Netheril was attacking Cormier and fighting all over. His father goes missing for over a month, and they assume he has to be battle dead.
Mm-hmm.
So they crown the son.
Mm-hmm.
The father comes back after 20-odd days into the throne room, and the son, who has hated ruling, with his mother sitting beside him, advising him on everything, says, "Oh, thank goodness," and abdicates so his father can be king again.
Right.
And then his father dies heroically, and then they say, "Sire," and he goes, "Nope, I abdicated."
Mm-hmm.
See my sister over there who's leading the charge? She is head of Cormier now. And that's how the novel ends.
And that's interesting because that echoes in what you did with Tanalasta and Alistair. So does Cormier still have a Vanderdehaast type wizard?
Well, that's the other interesting thing. Vanderdehaast is still around, but after he turned himself into a dragon and married Mirmeen. They were defending the kingdom. And then when the spell plague hit, it killed most of them. And Vanderdehaast ended up as this human head mated to a hand so he could scuttle around like a spider.
Oh, that's so sad. Okay.
But he's still there, and he can still comment on everything. But the war wizards have moved on, and they don't want to take orders from this monster.
Right.
But so he's still around. And Alusair, Tanalasta, has passed on. Alusair was there in Aaron's novel as a ghost.
Oh. Okay.
And she appears, and I used her in the Sage of Shadowdale books the same way. And she appears to sort of glare warningly at Bryn, the prince, and the princess. And at the end, when the princess takes the throne and does the stuff, Alusair appears one last time to nod approvingly.
You see, and this is the type of thing where you move forward, and the stories we get a lot of the themes get repeated, but basically we get that's progression, and I think I like that a great deal. I think Aaron probably did an absolutely fantastic job on that, because knowing her abilities. But I haven't been paying attention to all this after all this time. So the idea is, I would probably rehab Vanderdehaast, or at least put him to rest to let the next generation come on, because Cormier has only had like 3 wizards.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Well, the Ahast that is in Ganrahast is in charge now. But the whole point about Ganrahast is he's an okay wizard. He's an average wizard.
Yes.
He's not all powerful.
Mm-hmm. And you need to be if you're going to be advising Cormyr.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
So
Okay.
we're in interesting times. But yeah, Erin consulted with me and with Brian Cortillo all the while she was writing that to make sure that nothing got done that didn't fit.
And that feels right. And
Yeah.
that's the sort of thing. That's the level of continuity. I mean, it has been years and years since I've trod the realms, but knowing that it goes into good hands, knowing that people create good stories out of it, that makes me happy. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Well,
Me too.
I know you have to go, Jeff.
Yes, I do have to go.
have dinner.
I know you've got more, and I know you've got more questions.
So we'll do this later.
Well,
Apparently.
I'd like to do it again if you're up for it. We don't have to have such a long session next time. I know your time is very precious, especially with the game that came out, Crucible.
Crucible game
yes,
from Amazon,
yes,
free
and
on Steam.
everybody is free online on Steam, so everybody make sure you check it out. And and I also want to try to get Stephen and George in this also.
Sure.
But Stephen really wanted to be here, and he couldn't make it. I saw Curry just joined in. Unfortunately, we're at the end. Curry, sorry.
Hi, Curry.
Good to see you guys.
For the few minutes here.
Yeah.
But
And
thanks. Want to hang on? If you want to hang on, and
Yeah,
Curry,
I'll hang on.
talk for
But
a minute.
thanks, Jeff. This has been great. It's so nice to see you again.
It has been so good to see you in the flesh here, or in the semi-flesh. It is just we email back and forth, but we find out what's going on in our lives. But just it has been forever since we've had a chance to just sit around and tell the really boring old stories.
I need to make my millions so I have my Learjet so I can just fly out to Seattle.
But you have to understand, Jeff, because you and Ed, and this goes back to Gary Gygax as well, and all the other big names. Y'all are the pillars that developed this what it is today. Mm-hmm. No matter what direction it's gone into, but you're the pillars that built the Forgotten Realms, that built Greyhawk, that built all these wonderful settings and games, and it's a shame that your voice isn't out there more now like it was 20, 30 years ago.
That's okay. I think I said earlier in this discussion, Zeb Cook said, we get, bored easily. And
right.
We're always looking we're looking for new avenues. We're looking for new stories to tell.
Right.
And
Hi, Kate!
Yes, that was Kate telling me that I had to come to dinner. We're always looking for new stories. We're always looking for new tales to tell. We're always looking for new worlds. And in knowing that the stuff that we've done previously, people still remember, people still like, people still compare what's being happened now. Say, was it as good as the stuff they did back in those days? And that's okay. I mean,
exactly.
I want to see it. I want to see the. I think we're in an incredible position, Ed. That if people new stuff comes out and people don't like it, they all grouse about how good it was in the old days.
Yeah,
and
right.
And if they like it, they say, yes, it was built on this foundation. So we're in a win-win situation.
You
so.
are,
Yeah.
but I just always remember when I first bought the Monster Manual. I was 17 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and I was in my uncle's. I lived in Texas. I was in my uncle's RV on the beach in Clearwater. We had decided to camp out on the beach, and I'm sitting up in the upper loft of his RV, looking at this Monster Manual, and on the front of the cover it says Gary Gygax and Jeff Grubb.
Yes, that's Monster Manual 2.
Yes, Monster Manual 2, and that was my introduction into into D&D. Period.
Yeah.
And then of course it grew from there, and I just want to say thank you for everything that you've done.
Thank you. I mean, we really appreciate all the positive feedback and everything that people have said about the stuff we've worked on over the years. And yes, I have Monster Manual 2 stories.
Yes, I want to hear those next time.
I'll tell you about it next time. So.
Well, we appreciate it. Well, thank you so much. I'll let you go eat dinner. I don't want Kate to bust the door down.
It's okay. You gave me the 2-minute warning. So
there you go. Perfect. Well, thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate it. And you stay safe, and we'll set something up hopefully in the future.
Okay. Take care.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye, Jeff. Bye,
care.
Jeff. Thank you so much for joining us for that final episode with Jeff Grubb. I know we really enjoyed doing that and getting Jeff and Ed back together after a long time being apart. Our next up is going to be Eric Minji. I do hope you enjoyed it. He'll be on to talk about his supplement he did in the Moonshay Isles, and I think that you'll find it very interesting and worth picking up over at the DM's Guild. Don't forget to like our page over at Fans of Ed Greenwood, and to ring the bell to be updated on new content coming out. We're trying to get some more interviews going. Also, please send us suggestions on Fans of Ed Greenwood on Facebook about who you want us to interview or questions that you have. We'll take any and all questions and suggestions. We'll try to get as many authors as we can, or we can do fans. It's really up to the fan base themselves as to what they want to hear, so let us know. Let us hear from you. Until then, keep playing in the realms.
Hurry, hurry, step right up.
Come, marvel at tales of weird history that prove fiction has nothing on reality.
Thrill at stories of strange science, from the utterly mind-bending to the horribly misguided.
Chill from true tales of the unexplained, paranormal, and supernatural.
All this plus comedy, romance, and variety.
It's colossal!
It's stupendous!
It's your new favorite podcast, a delicious, mysterious tincture called Odd Tonic.
Join us in the parlor each week, dear guest, for a cup of tea and a bizarre, enthralling tale to delight the mind and stir the senses.
Odd Tonic, an exquisite elixir for those who love the odd?
Or a tantalizing treat for those who are the odd.
Yes.